What's up, everybody? We're at it again. Another installment in our study in the book of Ruth on the series that we're doing called When Will It Stop? You know, when will it stop? Sometimes you get bad news after bad news after bad news, and you get to the space in life where you're like, when will it stop? And we're tackling that idea, that concept as we go through God's word to discover some truth and some answers around that. And today I'm joined in the studio by some of my dearest friends and one that's a little bit dearer than anybody else on this planet. But I've got my man Ryan, my twin. Today we're twinning all the way. He brought me this beautiful gift, this wonderful shirt that we're gonna be twinning. And so, like, I had an idea that maybe when they reopen the economy and the malls are open again, Ryan, maybe you and I can go to the mall together wearing our twin shirts. I don't know.
We just need to buy matching shoes. That's the next level.
Next level is matching shoes. I don't know. I don't know how I feel about matching shoes, bro.
I got you.
Shirts I can get, but like, you know.
That's some husband-wife stuff.
I'd like to take video of it, so I'm down. I'm totally down.
I got Kevin Anderson. Welcome to this thing that we do here, man. I'm glad that you're here. And tell us a little bit of what you do at Relevant, a little bit of what's going on in your world right now.
Oh, sure, man. It's an honor to be here. I appreciate that. I get the amazing opportunity to be the Blippy at Relevant Church.
Blippy.
It's so
Yeah,
true.
I get to serve in kids ministry with my wife, my beautiful wife, Brandy Michelle Anderson. Little shout out there.
Hey.
And it's great to be here. I'm excited. I don't know what to expect, but I'm excited.
Oh, we expect something from you.
Oh,
So
snap.
we expect some of that amazing teaching that you've been laying down with the kids, and to break it down to the adults. Because if you can teach kids, you can teach adults. That's the
Oh, yeah. I don't want to teach adults. After teaching kids, I'm good. They're fun. They're open. They have fun. I'm good there.
No, that's the toughest audience, but thanks so much for all that you do. And then I've got my lovely wife, Pauline. See, that's what happens. I'm always like speechless. I don't know what to say. Like, you know, you gave me a look like, what are you gonna say next? And I froze there for a second. But thanks for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here. I'm excited for my kids to be watching a movie at home. Oh, I can't say that. Can I even say that, huh?
Yeah, you can, totally can.
And a shout out to all my fierce sisters. Hey, our women's ministry at Relevant Church, all my fierce sisters out there. Shout out to all you ladies. And we're in the book of Ruth, so it's very appropriate.
That's right. That's
Do
right.
the shout out.
It's a fierce message.
It's a fierce message. So here's the question, right? The question is, in your home, at your home, let's be very honest here. And I have to be honest because I have someone who can check me. In your home, who controls the remote control?
I get to physically navigate the remote control. It doesn't mean that I get to choose where it leads and what we click.
Oh, so you physically,
So
you hold
I
it.
physically hold the remote control, but we mutually make a decision on where to go.
All right. Who controls the remote in your house?
So it used to be my wife until we had children.
Boom.
So now my daughter, Emery, she controls the remote. We watch everything she wants to watch. Ryan, Blippy, anything that she wants, we watch it.
Exactly. Who controls the
So
remote?
true. It's so true. The kids rule the world in the home. If there's a child in the house, they got the remote control.
That's right.
Facts.
So I have my son. So we do Apple TV, and so you know the Apple TV remotes, right? So we have one that doesn't work and one that does work. So what my son does is that he'll give his sister or his brother the one that doesn't work.
Genius.
And make them feel as if they're the ones controlling the channels, but he's the one who's actually doing it. And I caught him the other day where he had some friends over and they were playing some game on the TV, and the kid was playing, and I'm looking at the kid and I'm like, you're not this good. And I look at Zion and Zion goes, shh. He's the one who's actually controlling the remote. So that's right. The kids are the ones who are running the show. They're the control freaks.
Yep.
They're the control freaks. And as far as Zion's concerned, I want to let you all know right now, transparently, he gets that from his mom.
It's actually true. That's so true. I'll take the control freak right here.
Oh, wow.
Really true.
True confessions.
It's true confessions.
I like where this is going.
It's happening right now. True confessions. So here's the thing, right? Like when you're driving with some people, right? You're driving you're carpooling somewhere. How do you feel about not being the one driving?
Ryan, what do you think?
I'm actually okay with it.
Yeah.
Yeah, just because I drive nonstop for work. So if I get a break to not drive, I'm
Right.
good.
Right.
I'm okay with it.
Right.
I prefer not to drive, to be honest with you. I'd rather just control the music, do what I'm good at.
Control the remote.
Yep.
Be the DJ, right?
Yep.
Right. It's funny how, like, a lot of times whenever we are, at least me, I've been in situations where I get in a car with someone who I've never ridden with before, and they start driving, and I'm like, I know I'm going to see God one day. I was just hoping it wasn't going to be today, and the entire trip, I'm just kind of like, yo, like, turn left, turn right, stop, slow down. You guys ever do that thing where you're driving with someone and you want them to brake and you start pushing your leg down on the floor, like, oh, brake. My wife used to do that.
No, I would just say braking, braking, braking.
That's right. So, in life, we're all oftentimes trying to steer or control the events of life, to steer our way out of trouble, to steer away to an easier road, to steer away to a pathway that fits our perspective, fits our plans and our philosophies. And our struggle as human beings is truly control.
Yeah.
We want to control everything around us. We want to control our job. We want to control our spouse. We want to control our kids. We want to control what other people think, say, do. I mean, like probably the thing that's causing a lot of the cancel culture that's happening around the world right now is, despite some people saying some weird things, is the fact that you can't control people to make them feel, think, and do the way that you want them to do.
Yeah.
So instead of letting them be people, we'd rather cancel them because that's a way of us asserting some level of control.
Right.
So we're very much all about control, and the thing about it is that we can't control what happens to us as much.
Right.
I don't know, like if you've ever been in a situation where you're like, something happened in your life, and you're like, why is this happening? And you want to change it. You want to change the channel. You want to change the volume. You want to change the frequency of it. You want to change the volume of like, the pain that you're feeling. And you realize, you get to that point where you really can't control what's happening to you. You can't control how it happens to you.
Right.
You can't control very much of it, at the very least. And so just kind of throwing it out there. What do you do when you feel as if you're not in control? What is your go-to?
To be honest with you, man, anytime I felt I wasn't in control, whether it was in marriage, whether it was in ministry, whatever it was, I can see my emotions getting the best of me in that situation where I can't control, thus just making the situation even worse than what it was when I first got involved. So that's definitely one thing that I see, that when I'm not in control, those emotions flare up. Definitely.
Right. Yeah. We have emotional responses, and sometimes the emotional responses become our truth.
Yep.
Whereas most of the time the emotions are nothing more than data to tell us how we're feeling, but not necessarily truth. I don't know if that makes sense. How sometimes we make our emotional response to something the truth when there's a different truth that's at work and at play.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know how that resonates with you guys. Feel free to jump in, interject.
For me, whenever I feel like things are happening to me and I can't control it, I know, and I'm sure you can attest to this, I will play the blame game. And I will naturally go ahead and be like, well, if this person, or if God didn't let that happen, or if my husband would just, not have done that, I would not be in this situation. And I naturally look at all the other people, and I don't include myself in the factor, or even take a moment to say, okay, what can I learn from this? But instead I just go to blame and want to pick out someone and someone else's problem and what they've done to affect me, instead of just taking any kind of responsibility or reflecting and taking a moment and say, God, what can you teach me in this? Right. Instead of, God, why is this happening to me?
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I think feeling out of control a lot of the times is just like a desired outcome in our mind, not manifesting on the outside. And so I think that's where the blame comes in. I think that's where a lot of that comes in. But for me, I think what I'm learning lately is the emotions that come. If we don't pay attention to the emotions first, then we get to the out of control moment. And then once we hit the out of control moment, we feel as if we have no control over the next emotion.
Right.
When all an emotion is just a signal, right?
Yeah.
So
data.
we feel an emotion. It's a data point. It's a signal. And then if we say to ourselves, this emotion makes me feel a little bit out of control,
Right.
and it's probably because I'm seeking to control something that is not within my realm or locus. Right. And it can help you to center it. But too often we get on the roller coaster and we ride the emotion, and then we blame the emotion when the roller coaster's over.
Come on.
And we go,
that's
how
good.
dare you make me ride this ride? Right? When we had the choice to pull the brake and be aware of it. So,
Yeah, man. I as a pastor, I'm rarely the first person people call when they have good news. I'm rarely the first person people call. I mean, every once in a blue moon at 2:00 in the morning, I might receive a text message that says the baby's here, and then there's a picture. But generally speaking, at 2 a.m. text message that I get is going to be the worst news that you want to hear. And serving God's people, you get to understand that most people, everyone, at some level in their life they're experiencing some sort of trauma, some sort of hurt, some sort of tension in their life. I always tell people that there's 3 reasons why people come to church. They're in trouble, in transition, or experiencing some sort of turmoil. And they're looking for an answer to that. And whenever I'm in the marketplace, people discover like, oh, you're a pastor. And words like this will come out. Oh, I haven't been to church in 15 years. And I'll say, why haven't you been to church in 15 years? They'll say, well, here's what happened. My mother was sick. She had cancer. I prayed. I did everything. And she died. And I haven't been back since. Or I went through a terrible divorce and that relationship ended. We were very involved in the church. Nobody called. Nobody was there and I'm out. I mean, like it's always these interesting stories of how a painful experience led to a departure or a distrust in God and distrust in God's people, and just an all-out, painful outgrowth of that incident. And what will happen next generally is that they'll say, but in time I'll come back. In time I'll come back. I'll give it some time. I still got some time to heal. And at some point I'll make it back. And I think that most people are under this false notion that time heals our wounds.
That's good.
We're under this false notion that time heals our wounds. And we're often confounded and confused when it's been months, when it's been years, when it's been a decade, and you realize, oh my goodness, it's been this long. Something happened to us, and we haven't found answers. We're not better. We're not feeling reconciled. We actually feel the same. And sometimes that root of bitterness or that pain just compounds and grows and grows and grows to a point where you don't even know what the initial trigger point was.
Yep.
Right. So if you're writing down, this is something I'd say write this down. Healing takes time, but time doesn't heal. Healing takes time, but time itself does not heal. Time by itself does not heal our hurts. It doesn't heal anything. So the question that we need to be asking is, how are you, rather, the question that we have to ask is, how do you let go of the things that you can't control? Because a lot of times you get hurt and you've experienced pain and you're wounded, and the ultimate reason was because you couldn't control the situation. It causes pain. The result is pain. So the question is, how do we let go of things that we can't control? Because here's the fact. Holding on to hurts isn't helping.
Yeah.
Holding on to that pain isn't helping. If time itself doesn't heal, right? If time itself doesn't heal, how do you let go of the things that do hurt us in time? It's not a question that it's supposed to be answered, really. It's we get to look at God's word and figure it out. And so I just want to catch everybody up to where we're at in the passage here. What's happened is that Elimelech and Naomi, suburbs of Bethlehem, life is good. And then a famine hits the place. They lose jobs, they lose their homes, they lose everything, and there's no work anywhere. Everyone is hungry. Everyone is in the same boat. There's no stimulus package happening. And Elimelech says, you know what, let's go to Moab. Let's leave and go to Moab. They go to Moab, and what happens there is the first tragedy that takes place is that, well, the first tragedy is that they left God's place of provision,
Right.
Bethlehem, and they went to Moab. Second bad piece of bad news is that they get to Moab seeking for a better opportunity, and Elimelech, Naomi's husband, dies.
Right.
And bad news. Other bad news, culturally speaking, for them as Jewish people, is that their two sons, marry Moabite women. And so there's another blow there for them. And then not only do they marry them, but within 10 years, they die. And now Naomi is without a husband. She's without children. She's a widow. She's childless. And so here she is with these two daughter-in-laws that also are widows. And that's where she's at. They've lost all control.
Yeah.
There's been nothing that they've been able to, they try to control the narrative by moving somewhere, by taking an action to go somewhere. And here they find nothing but calamity after calamity. And so when Naomi does decide to go back to Bethlehem, we find her to be a bitter widow. She comes back and she's like, don't call me Naomi, which means pleasant. Call me Mara, which means bitter, for the Lord has dealt bitterly with me. She's bitter and she's resentful, and she blames God for everything that's happened to her. She's, if I can say it this way, what's happened to her is that she hasn't been to church in over 10 years.
Sheesh.
And she's blaming God for all her issues. They lost control, and they blame God for all the issues. And so I think that what we need to do to find answers here is to look at Ruth, her daughter-in-law, because I think Ruth starts to provide some answers as to what you do when you can't control the things that are around you. How do you deal with those things? You can't control what happens to you, but you can control literally the response that you give to the situation.
Yep.
So first step, first point, first step, my first idea I like to throw out at you guys is, number one is that you need to recognize that God is involved in every detail of your life long before you're ever aware of it.
Yeah.
Recognize that God is in control of every detail of your life long before you are aware of it. And he's personally interested in every detail. He isn't some deity that sets the universe in order and then abandons it and is like, watching from a distance, an absentee landlord, but rather he's very, very interested in every single detail. He wants to hear every prayer that you pray. He wants to hear it all. He wants to get involved with it. And when I think about that is, it kind of freaks me out that God's interested. So what freaks you out about knowing or even trying to think through a God that's interested in you personally?
What freaks me out?
Yeah.
Is that, just to be 100% honest with you, hearing that, what freaks me out is just knowing that, in my worst sins, the worst things that I've ever done, my Father was still present, loving me. So just seeing that, it kind of freaks out, like, wow, a God so powerful, what would make you want to be in relationship with this broken vessel? So just knowing that, like, through thick and thin, through the bad and the good times, no matter how bad things get, my God is always going to be there with me. And no matter how much I'm acting up.
Right. And let me just push back to that, and this is for everybody. Why is it, do you think, that whenever we think about God's being interested in us, our natural fallback is to negativity in our life? Seriously, like you said, he's interested in us. Why would he be interested in someone? You follow what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I think we, especially in today's culture, I think we place God as a peer to worldly standards. So we think that God cares the same as the people in the world do about us. So if we feel that people judge us, or if people are critical, or people look at our negatives and feel some type of way about us, or if they knew our negatives, they would feel some way about us. And we sort of like drop down God to that same level.
Right.
And we sort of say, well, if they feel that way, then he also has to.
Right.
Right. And we don't see him as literally a perfected father that has an unconditional love that doesn't equate to any worldly standard.
Right.
It doesn't match to any critical nature. It doesn't match to judgment on earth. It doesn't equalize any of that.
Right.
And so I think too often we change the realm and the nature of God in our head.
Right.
And so we deem him to be somebody critical just as somebody else would next to us, you know?
Yeah. We sort of expect God to treat us the way that we would treat
You got it.
each other.
Yeah.
Oh man.
I mean, this whole, I would say, think about like your job, think about your, even a relationship. Everything has to do in my life about me earning some kind of position or place. I have to do things to get you to like me. When Jonathan and I were together, oh boy, did I pull out some food to cook. I'm like, I want him to know
Amen.
that I can throw down. I made sure my hair was did and all those things because we feel like we always have to show our best self, to perform, to do all these things that people will like us. My kids know that if they want to get a star beside their name, they need to do a chore. They need to do something to get their mama to put a star beside their name so they can go to the Dollar Tree, which I'm glad they're 5 and they think the Dollar Tree is the place to go. So
That place is heaven.
that's right.
I hate that place. I hate the Dollar Tree. Take them to Target, please. Don't take them to the Dollar Tree anymore. I'm tired of coming home finding Dollar Tree toys. Anyways,
There's a huge difference, and I love what you said. There's a huge difference between doing and being. And I think too often the world cares about what we do, and God just wants us to be a certain way.
right.
And so too often we externally go to do things to show off to others, as opposed to silently in our own relationship with God, work through being and work through becoming something different, right? Rather than out there doing something. So it just resonated with me what you said, is that too often in the world we just have to be doing something, as opposed to being a certain way, and actually just becoming something that God, actually loves.
Right. There's this passage that the psalmist David pens in Psalm 8, verse 4. He says this. He says, when I look into verse 3, he says, when I look at your heavens, the works of your fingers, the moon and the stars, which you have set in place, what is man that you are mindful of him, and the son of man that you care for him? Yet you have made him a little lower than the heavenly beings and crowned him with glory and honor. He himself is like looking at that. It's like, man, you did all this, and yet you think of me, and you crown me with glory. You like, it's like one of those too heavy for us to even perceive in our finite minds to think through. But God is interested. He's very, very interested in every detail of our life. In Psalm 139, he says, the thoughts that you have, he knows the thoughts you've already had. And then the thoughts that he has towards you, if you're there to be numbered, they'll outnumber the grains of sand in all the earth, And we can get super granular and say that means that he has good thoughts towards us that equal all the sand that's at Newport Beach, if you could count all this grains of sand, at Santa Monica, at Huntington Beach. I mean, like, I have about 50 good thoughts per day towards my kids, 50, But God has this infinite number of great thoughts of how he thinks about me, how he cares about every detail of our life. And Psalm 37, verse 23 says, the Lord directs the steps of the godly. He delights in every detail of their lives, right? So here's this woman, Naomi and Ruth, they're coming back to Bethlehem. She's bitter. She's resentful. She has a long history of all these things that have happened to her. And yet, unbeknownst to her, God is still engaged. God is still involved. He's still showing up. The other part about this is that he not only is he involved in the details of our life, but he's involved long before we were even aware that we were going to have a detail.
Yeah.
That's the crazy thing about it. Like he's aware of what's going to happen before the details of your greatest worst day of your life. He's already aware that that's going to take place, right? Yep. So, and it's in ways that we can never understand or even like think about. He's working behind the scenes. So in the book so far, we've met Ruth, We've met Naomi. We've met Orpah or Oprah, right? And what's happening here is that there's this verse that shows up that's literally out of place. The verse that shows up next is literally an out of place verse, and I want us to kind of look at it because when you read the story of Ruth, it almost comes out of nowhere. Okay, and just to kind of retell the story, not to be redundant here, but I'm going to retell the story. The story of Ruth so far is Naomi's family moves to Moab because of a famine. Naomi's husband dies. Naomi's sons dies. They get married first, then they die. Naomi decides to go back to Bethlehem. Naomi brings Ruth with her. Naomi arrives in Bethlehem. Naomi is bitter and resentment, and she is blaming God for everyone, for everything that's happened in her life. She has this history of all these things. Chapter 1 was all these bad things that happened in their life. And she shows up into Bethlehem, and then this verse comes out of nowhere because we've been talking about Naomi and Elimelech dying and her sons dying and all these things that are happening to her. She's coming back saying, I left full, I'm coming back empty. And here she shows up in verse 1 of Ruth chapter 2. Now Naomi had a relative of her husband's, a worthy man of the clan of Elimelech, whose name was Boaz. We have not heard about Boaz. And what's happening here is I like to park on words like now. I'm going to park on that for a second because now is a very interesting word in this whole story. I think it's the first time it's showing up. Now. What's happening to Naomi and Ruth is that Naomi's like, don't call me Naomi, call me Mara. The Lord has done this to me. You don't understand what happened to us. We lost everything. And then now shows up. Now. And now is interesting because you can be in your past and not aware of your now.
Oh, that's good. Say that again, for real.
One more time. Hold on.
Right? You can be in your past. You can be stuck in your past and never aware of now. And that's what the author's doing, guys. I mean, it's like, and tell me how this is hitting you guys, is that he is literally, we've had this micro experience with Naomi and Ruth. They've traveled. We've been focusing on this family, right? And then when the author of the book of Ruth says, now, Naomi had a relative, it's literally, let's zoom out and give you the larger picture of what's at work. You're stuck in your past. You're stuck in what's happening in your life. You're stuck at all the bad things that have taken place in your life. And God's like, now, zoom out. Right? And I'll submit this to you, and I would love to hear your feedback, because the thing is this, that now is never understood now. Now is always understood later.
Come on. Facts. So true. So true.
Right? We never understand now, what's happening now, until later on. You never understood. You never understand what's happening to you now is that maybe you're getting fired. Maybe you're losing the home. Maybe maybe they're dumping you now. But there's something else at work now.
Man, I'll just speak real quick. I mean, one way that really speaks to me is hearing all that. You see Naomi come from a place of survival. She left her whole family, left that land, went to the place they're not supposed to go to, and it was simply because that there was a famine going on. So it's interesting how like the famines in our lives can lead us into survival, which then brings up self-preservation, which means that you're going to do everything to keep yourself. You're going to focus on you. And then it's funny that like going into chapter 2, it's Ruth that sees the opportunity, not Naomi, because her mindset is stuck in survival when Ruth is on opportunity.
Right. Ruth is in the now.
Yeah, exactly.
Naomi, and you see the dynamic of that here in a second, the next few verses, because and the way that the author's setting this up is very interesting, because Ruth has no idea who Boaz is. it's very likely that Ruth never even knew who Elimelech was, right? Naomi may be familiar with who Boaz is, but is not intimately involved in maybe, because I mean, if she thought that Boaz could do anything, she probably would have said, we're going back to Bethlehem. We're going to go see our relative of my former husband. There's a guy named Boaz over there, and he's going to take care of it. He's going to sort all this. He owns land, and he's rich, and he's got things going on. But no, she's not even aware that there's something else at work.
Yeah.
Right. And I think what the author's doing with this verse 1 of chapter 2 is that he's showing us God at work in the now. This is him saying, let me show you how the pieces on the game are working together. Let me show you how this puzzle is starting to fit together all over again. Long before you've been even aware of your problem, long before you've been even thinking about a solution to your problem, I've been working on Boaz. Boaz is a single man probably thinking, there ain't no good women in Bethlehem. He has his own problems going on in his life, right? And God's like, now, there was a man, a relative of Naomi's husband, a worthy man of the clan of Elimelech, whose name was Boaz. Where have you seen in your life where you thought where the details of how God worked something out shocked you? Like you could not have put it together that way.
In my life, when I actually years ago first met Keisha, she comes from a lineage of devout Christians, and her parents are pastors, and she grew up in the church. I had a 10-year journey in my 20s of being, let's just say it, Buddhist, studied Islam, and atheist for sure. And we were having a conversation one night and doing this question book because we were long distance. So we're filling out this question book, we're getting to know each other, right? And comes up religion question. And the religion question says, how do you feel about your kids involving religion and church, right? Your future kids, get to know each other. Well, she replies, well, obviously I've envisioned having a Christian husband and going to a Christian church and taking our children to church, right? Simple. I responded with, I never want my children to ever step foot into a Christian church as long as I live. This was about 3 years ago. Right. And so I'm here. God provides the most angelic, patient, amazing, godly woman. I declare a hardened heart. I imagine God laughed in heaven and said, this is going to be cool. Right? This is going to be fun for me. And all along, all the work and everything he was doing was years before that, was Keisha being who she is, was aligning so much of everything going on. Right. I'm stuck in this past. I'm stuck in the past religious hurt. I'm stuck in the past, lack of religious understanding, a lot of things going on.
Right.
But yet, despite all that, there's still in a distance, literal distance, it was another state, things were happening and things were being prepared for, us to meet and for me to see God's bigger work. Right. Now, what's crazy is when we first meet, it's not immediate. I don't think people just walk into something and go, God, I see you for the last 5 years. Right?
Only weird people.
Right?
I meet people like that.
Instantly, oh, that's God. Yeah, that's God.
So
absolutely,
I'm
he did it all. Right?
Right.
And so for me, it took a journey.
Right.
And it took a journey, and it wasn't from force. It wasn't from declaring. It wasn't from sit down, read the Bible. It was just actions on her part of living the way she needed to live and being studious to what God is telling her that dropped me on an intersection one night, and I texted her and said, we're going to church.
Right.
And her text was, stop playing with me. So if you right? Stop playing with me. And I said, no, we're serious. And so we walked into a church, and then her mother led us here, and it's just a giant story after that.
Right.
But I just think that a lot of the time we have no idea what God is doing.
Right.
But the thing that is interesting about this is the preparation needed
Right.
for the now of God.
Yeah.
If I don't leave when there's a famine, if I don't obey to come back, if I quit in the middle of the journey that God is directing me to, I may not make it back.
Right. Right.
I may not make it back to actually meet Boaz.
Right.
Because God won't force me to do it.
Right.
Right. I had to go through it and persevere.
Absolutely. So second step, right? Second step of letting go letting go of control. Letting go of control. Letting go of the need to feel as if you need to have control. Second step is this, is that while you're waiting for God to work on something else. While you're waiting for God to work on something else. In my life, I'm not going to talk about anybody else but mine. Something will happen in my life, right? I'll pray about it. And, being that I'm an anointed man of God, he hears my prayer. And guess what happens next? Nothing. Nothing happens. So I pray again. And still nothing. And then what will happen is that we'll get to this place where it starts driving us crazy. Like I'm praying. Like, oh, this prayer stuff doesn't work. Is he even listening? Is he even out there? God, if you're there, may a red Mercedes pass by. You ever like
License plate numbers.
Yeah, license plate numbers. They have the exact coordinate. Right? Or you do that thing where you open up. God, if you're listening, I'm going to open up my Bible, and wherever I put my finger to, it's going to be the answer to the, we do all these things. We start dealing with some like really, really crazy stuff, But how do you deal with that? Like, how do you deal with that? Like when you feel as if you're praying and going to God and nothing is happening, what's your go-to? What's your fallback? Where does your mind go? Where does your heart go?
Unfortunately, sometimes, and it kind of goes back to what you were first talking about, is when I don't see it happening on my timeline, that's where I jump in and try to grab the wheel and get us to where I feel like we should be going.
Right.
Just to realize that I'm leading us down nowhere, or I'm leading myself down nowhere. So for myself, anytime I feel that God is not answering when I want, I could definitely see myself jumping in and trying to be the captain.
Right.
I remember thinking, even when we started the church, thinking, if everything would be perfect, then I know it'd be God. Like if the finances came together, if a bunch of people showed up, if our marriage was all together, then I know it would be God. And I've realized in our journey this past decade that oftentimes when there's need, like when there's something that is messed up in my life, when I have a need and I'm like, I don't know how this is going to work out, that's where God's like, that's why you need me. Like, that's the reason why I exist, is because I used to think that God got glory out of perfect people. I used to think that God got glory out of perfect people that just had it all together. And then it's like, okay, but no, God's like, I don't get any glory if you have it all together, if there is no need. Yeah. But when there's a need in your life, when there's problems, when the finances don't come together, when you're preaching to 5 people, like when we started the church, we're like, oh, great, this is the Sunday that we're going to sit in a circle because there's just that many people.
No microphone needed at that point.
No, really, I don't think we did. I think one of your truly, right? We sat in a circle at the Life Arts building.
Of course. And you make it like, a God thing. Like, I think the Lord's just calling us to sit in a circle and look at each other.
The affinity rises in the circle.
The Lord sits on the circle of the earth. So look at us sit in a circle now.
You can take those examples of life and be like, God's not in this, and then I'm just going to stop. That's what I feel like doing. A Sunday like that happens, or something happens where I'm frustrated with you and I'm like, why did I marry this guy?
You never think that. Please don't put it out there.
Sorry, you're right. You're right. I never think that. Okay,
you think that? You think that, really? I never question why I married you. I know exactly why I married you. No,
for a green card? No.
No, you needed the green card.
It's true. I really did. The Syrian Canadian girl. But truly, I think that that's where like God like shows up in a way where it's like my need is God's miracle and his revelation to people in his life. If we didn't have a story where it was like, man, we started and we felt like giving up because money wasn't coming in, because people weren't showing up. Ryan, you wouldn't be here today. If 10 years ago, sitting in a circle, Kevin Anderson, you wouldn't be doing what you're doing, leading kids. God could use other things, but I'm just saying he's brought us together because we said we're not going to give up. And even though things aren't coming together like I want it to, I'm going to put my hand to something. I'm going to get ready. I'm going to keep on doing what I know to do without knowing the solution or knowing how it's going to come together until that now solution happens.
Right. Right. So. And that's so important because a lot of times we can be just so focused on what's not working that it disables us from doing any kind of work.
Yeah.
And here's a Christianese thing that Christians do. Well, Pastor, we're just waiting on the Lord. And you know, I've spiritual pastor friends who say that I'm the most pragmatic person. But you know, while you're waiting for God to work on something else.
Come on.
Stay busy. You know, the thing is this, that in the New Testament, Jesus only came and found people who were already busy. He never went and used people that were like waiting for the Lord to choose them. He always called out busy people. Peter and his brothers were, you know, Peter, James, and John, they were out fishing. They were working on their boats. Matt, I call him Matt. Matthew was at his tax collector booth. They were all doing something, busy, working on something else while God was working, right? Mm-hmm. So, you know, and the other thing too is this, is that never despise the work that you don't feel as if is a part of your destiny. You know, because my mentor taught me that all work works. Amen. It's either working on you or you're working on it, but all work works. All work produces some sort of a result. And so this is what Ruth does. Ruth is literally praying, I'm in a new place, God do something, and then she gets busy to working while she waits on God. All right? She's a widow just like Naomi. She's absolutely a widow. She's left everything behind to go to this foreign land. She's surrounded by strange people, strange language probably, strange land, and she starts working there. And the verse says this, verse 2 says, one day, Ruth the Moabite said to Naomi, let me go out into the harvest fields to pick up the stalks of grain left behind by anyone who is kind enough to let me do it. Right there, she's believing that there's going to be someone there, right? Naomi replied, all right, my daughter, go ahead. So Ruth went out to gather grain behind the harvesters. And as it happened, that's probably one of my favorite verses in the book of Ruth. And as it happened, it just so happened, right? She found herself working in a field that belonged to Boaz, the relative of her father-in-law, Elimelech. What do you do when you get to a new town? You're jobless, you're penniless, you're hungry, you're foodless. You pray. The Christian things that the first thing you're going to do is pray, right? Lord, help us, right? But while you're praying, while you're waiting on the Lord, work on something.
Yeah.
Like Ruth has literally says, okay, Naomi, we're going to pray that some sort of provision will come. Something will break through. We're going to pray for breakthrough and all these things. And in the meantime, while we pray for that, while we stand in that, while we stand on that promise, can I go and gather some grain after people who might just drop something and let me pick it up behind them? I mean, think about the humility of that role, that type of job. Like, I'm not even going to be an official hired employee. I'm just going to go behind the harvesters, and whatever falls off the wagon, if you will, whatever they drop, whatever scraps I can pick up behind them, that's what I'm going to pick up. And for some of us would say, well, what do you mean I need to go back to minimum wage? What do you mean I need to take a secondary role? What do you mean I have to go back to, first level? I'm here. And so, but when you are faced with something you can't control, work.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
While you wait, right? Do whatever it takes. I don't know, like how does that sit with you? Like, in our culture today, does that even sound like something that our culture accepts as something that we should do?
I mean, in that respect, I would say no. I feel like we're in a space where to settle, to go beneath that humility is really like what's missing. But it's funny how that those scraps in God's hands is so much more.
Come on now.
So seeing her being willing to pick up the scraps, it's almost as if she knew, even though God wasn't even her God at that point. She's a Moabite woman. It's crazy to just see how God came alongside of her in co-creation, and that ended up being like the catalyst moment that led to something so much greater.
Right. Ruth is like, God help me. And while she's waiting on God, she gets busy working on something else, And I think that's like one of the key ways that you let go of things that you can't control. You stop focusing on what you can't control, and you start working on what you can work on.
No, it's an amazing point. I think a lot of times in business, let's say, or work, right? If something seems out of my control, right, and I can't control this part of the process or this thing with the account, or there's a different department working on something on my account and I just can't progress it, I can either sit in that and be like, let me fight through something I really can't control, or I can pause and say to myself, what I can control is let's just go out and generate new business and the rest will figure it out.
Right.
And so, and what's crazy is when I do go out and do that, the accounts seem to progress a little faster.
Right.
And it may not, right? It's just mentally.
Right.
Mentally, you're like, oh my gosh, that just seems so much easier.
Right.
But going from the question of I can't control this to what exactly can I right now, and making that move immediately,
Right.
is just a transformative situation in any scenario.
Amen.
But the thing that you pointed out that I really love in this is too often we pray for a conditional change in our life and don't want to go do the character work to prepare for the conditional change.
Come on.
That's good.
So we pray for, give me more food, give me provision, give me better people in my life. I arrived here with nothing. Please just give it to me. And then we want to go sit on the throne in the palace that somebody else has built.
Right.
And say, I'm going to sit here till God gives it to me. Or you can say, give me the food, help me with the resources, etc., and then go pick up the grain on the road.
Yeah.
So that God sees a human who says, I trust you to work. Right. I'm going to do whatever I can at any level I can.
Right.
And then you just happen to realize that God provides.
Right.
We don't want to do the character work. We just want to pray for a condition.
All work works. That's exactly what it's either working on you, building character, or you're working on it.
Yeah.
Right. Third thing, I think I'm on number 3. Third thing that you can do to let go of control of things that you can't control is know that God will always meet you where you are. God will always meet you where you are. Will give you what you need to get you through what you're going through. God will meet you where you are. Will give you what you need to get you through what you're going through. It doesn't matter if you haven't been to church in 13 years, 10 years, Naomi. It doesn't matter if you've never been to church ever before, Ruth. This is her first time around the people of God, if you will, right? He'll meet you exactly where you are to give you what you need and help you through it. So there's 4 things in this passage that take place in Ruth's life that shows how God is doing exactly that, meeting her where she's at, giving her what she needs to get her through what she's going through. And the first thing is, and when I'm just going to go through these really quickly, is provision. The first thing that she gets is provision. The text says, while she was there, Boaz arrived from Bethlehem and greeted the harvesters. The Lord be with you, he said. The Lord bless you, the harvesters replied. Then Boaz asked his foreman, who is that young woman over there? Who does she belong to? And the foreman replied, she is the young woman from Moab who came back with Naomi. She asked me this morning if she could gather grain behind the harvesters. She's been hard at work ever since. Like, they took notice of that. She's been hard at work ever since, except for a few minutes of rest in the shelter. Boaz went over and said to Ruth, listen, my daughter, stay right here with us when you gather grain. Do not go into any other fields. Stay right behind the young women working in my fields. See which part of the field that they're harvesting, and then follow them. I have warned the young men not to treat you roughly, and when you are thirsty, help yourself to the water that they have drawn from the well. Let other people do the work for you. Come on now. I don't know. I think I feel a preach coming on here, right?
Come on.
Here's Boaz literally saying, whatever you need, it's provided for you. If you're thirsty, there'll be water for you. If they switch fields, follow after them. You will not go hungry, right? So the first thing we see is provision. God meeting her where she's at by giving her provision to help her get through what she's going through. Second thing, she receives praise. She receives a praise. She says, Ruth fell at his feet, thanked him warmly, right? And here's the thing about it. When you're going through what you're going through, don't think that others aren't watching you how you're going through it.
Come on.
There's some people who go through stuff, and as they're going through it, you're like, oh man, they're going through something. And then there are other people, when they're going through something, it's inspiring. Like, wow, they're going through that, but man, their attitude, their ethics, they're more, I mean, like, you follow what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Right? So watch what happens. It says, Ruth fell at his feet and thanked him warmly. What have I done to deserve such kindness? She asked, I am only a foreigner. Yes, I know, Boaz replied, but I also know about everything you have done for your mother-in-law since the death of her husband, of your husband. I have heard how you left your father and mother and your own land to live here among the complete strangers. May the Lord, the God of Israel, under whose wings you have come to take refuge, reward you fully for what you've done. I hope to continue to please you, sir, she replied. But it's just amazing to me how, like, even in that short period of time, Boaz has gotten the blueprint, the whole story. Like, yeah, we've heard about your character. We've heard about what you're doing. We've heard about how you deserted all that you knew so you could come here to make sure that your mother-in-law was taken care of. We honor that. So she receives provision, and then she receives praise for all the things that she's been doing in diligence during this difficult time. And she goes on, she says, you have comforted me by speaking so kindly to me, even though I'm not one of your workers, right? I don't know if that's like, anything that's jumping out to you guys, you can jump in and share, like,
Favor ain't fair. I know we hear that. But what I love about it is that it's her testimony that's gone before her.
Right.
Because it said the men were like, man, she was here working in the morning. So first she worked hard. She wasn't like sitting on her butt. She was here in the morning and she only took one break. They like make a notice. Hey, she only took one quick break and then she came back. So she worked hard. Okay, she didn't just sit on her butt and do nothing. She worked hard, and then all of a sudden she's getting all this crazy favor because she didn't know how it was all going to come together, but feet are meant to walk forward. And so she just walked forward with what she had in front of her. Thank you, Stephanie Wallace, Move your feet forward for shout out for, what is it?
Yeah. So it's huge right there, Third thing that we start seeing happening to Ruth of how God's meeting her where she's at, providing every need that she needs to get her through what she's going through is she receives preference. There's preference that she receives. Verse 14 says, come over here and help yourself to some food, Boaz says. You can dip your bread in the sour wine. So she sat with the harvesters and Boaz gave her some roasted grain to eat. I mean, that's preference. That's favor, right? Yeah. Right? She ate all she wanted and still had some left over. When Ruth went back to work again, Boaz ordered his young men, let her gather grain right among the sheaves without stopping her. Now she's like getting a promotion. She's not getting scraps. She's like, I want you to put her in position that she can really, really get a good harvest out of this place, right? And then watch this. He says, and pull out some heads of barley from the bundles and drop them on purpose for her. Now he's saying, like, now don't just do your work, but I want you to, like, just look back behind you and just be like, just grab some and just like, he's kind of like, he's flirting. That's what's happening right here, like, all right, Drop them on purpose for her. Let her pick them up and don't give her a hard time. So Ruth gathered barley there all day, and when she beat out the grain that evening, she had filled an entire basket. She carried it back into town, showed it to her mother-in-law. Ruth also gave her the roasted grain that was left over from her meal. Where did you gather all this grain today? Naomi asked. Where did you work? May the Lord bless the one who helped you. I just want you guys to picture an Italian mother or a Mexican mom or you're like, girl, where did you? Where were you? That's what's happening right here, right? Yep. She's asking like, no, this is not normal. Yeah. You got some roasted grain that you're handing out. Come on, right? Yeah. Who helped you? And the Lord bless him. So Ruth told her mother-in-law about the man whose field she worked. She said, the man I worked with today is named Boaz. She got preference. When you are waiting on God, you get to work on the things. When you're waiting on him, work on something else. And as you're working on something else, it's strange how he is using your diligence and your faithfulness in that season to arrange certain orders of events in your path. The steps of a righteous man are ordered by God. I mean, we can go all day about this stuff, right? Fourth thing that she gets is protection. In verse 20 through 22, Naomi responds. She says, "May the Lord bless him," Naomi told her daughter-in-law. "He is showing his kindness to us as well as to your dead husband." Now, watch how the tune of a bitter, resentful woman shifted simply because of Ruth, who decided to move her feet forward, who decided to allow the now that God was doing to take place in her life. Her tone completely shifts. She's like, he's showing kindness to us as well as to your dead husband. That man is is our closest relative, one of our family redeemers. Then Ruth said, what's more, Boaz even told me to come back and stay with his harvesters until the entire harvest is completed. Good, Naomi exclaimed. Do as he said, my daughter. Stay with his young women right through the whole harvest. You might be harassed in any other fields, but you'll be safe with him. So she gets protection. She's like, stay with him. This is a place of covering. This is a place of protection. This is a place where this is family that you're dealing with here. So if you're going to let go of what you can't control, number one, recognize that God's involved in every detail of our life, long before you're even aware of it. Number two, while you're waiting on God to work on something else. Number three, know that God will always meet you where you are and will give you what you need to get you through what you're going through, right? Finally, my last point, and I'm done, right? And I'm done. Show up. Show up each and every day. Do what you can and ask God for the things that you can't do. Do what you can and ask God to do what you can't do. Show up, right? I just want to read the very last verse, because here's the thing about it. God's at work. God's making change. The momentum is shifting. All these things are happening. But usually what happens is that, number one, we stop showing up.
Yeah.
We stop showing up. If change is going to take place in our life, consistency is going to have to be key. The text says this literally. Let me read it to you guys. Verse 23, so she kept close to the young women of Boaz, gleaning until the end of the barley and wheat harvest, and she lived with her mother-in-law. She kept close. She showed up daily. Probably one of the greatest tragedies of American and modern-day Christianity is we believe in drive-through, breakthrough.
Come on.
You know, I prayed the prayer. I'm changed.
What's next?
What's next, right? And day two happens and you don't show up because you're believing on something that took place in a moment. I don't know if that's even translating, if that's making sense.
No, definitely. I mean, and hearing that too is so much bigger than just physically being present, right? When I hear show up, it sounds like more of a mindset that is open to what's taking place, a mindset that's open to utilize your past hurts so that it can be the very thing that takes you to where God is going.
Right.
Because like I think about it, and I don't know why no one didn't warn me. Pastor Jay, I wish you would have warned me.
I did warn you. You weren't listening.
Maybe you did. But, you know, I think about my first 2 years of marriage. And I remember getting to a place where with my wife where we were very, we had a lot of friction, a lot of just issues going on. We were in a space where we were trying to change each other because in premarital, we were lying. Mm-hmm. Like, you go through the questions and all that, and you don't spill
You too?
Yeah. So I remember there being times where I would show up to my house, I would show up home, and yeah, I'm there, but I did not show up mentally ready to work on something that needs to be worked on. Right. So hearing that, it's bigger than just being there, but it has a mindset that is willing to get to work, like you're saying.
Right. You know, like healing takes time.
Healing takes time, yep.
But time itself does not heal. Mm-hmm. Healing takes time, but time itself does not heal you. It's what you do in the time. And in the time, you have to show up and be present and engage daily.
Yeah, I think too often in my life, I'm guilty of this too. I'll pray for some sort of conditional change, or pray for what I think He can do, but I don't pray for what I can't control. You know, too often we pray for, please help this to change in relationships and money and job and family and all the health and all that stuff, but we don't say, what can't I control right now? Because the answer to that is an opportunity of complete surrender.
Right?
Yeah.
And we don't want to have an opportunity to say, you're right, I can't control this. I'm literally going to put this right at your feet, and I'm going to go work over here.
Right.
Because the more I try to control this, the more I try to be like you and take your role in my life.
Right.
And so if I'm trying to control everything, I immediately remove God out of my life, because if I can control it, who needs anyone else?
Right.
And so, asking what can't I control, and then realizing it's an amazing opportunity to say, God, this is only for you. But I'm not going to sit here and wait on it, right? This is only for you to help, right? I'm going to surrender all of it, but I'm also going to go get grain off the road.
Right.
And it's funny how like we use time to heal when where you're waiting on that healing, time has now become your enemy. It's crazy how we look to time in that facet, but it's really like, no, time is against you. There's a lot of times in the Bible where God's like, no, go now.
Right.
So it's just interesting, how you picked up on that. Like we wait on time to heal all these various wounds, but it's like, nah, time's going to be your enemy, and it's going to create resentment to where you're looking at everything else. Like, why did this happen? Why did it not happen yet?
Right. Yeah, I love that. Time can work against you if you're not showing up. Mm-hmm. If you're not showing up and working on what you can work on, it definitely goes against you. And what I'll say is this, is that the way that Ruth let go of her past is that she showed up daily and consistently put in work on what she could control and prayed for what she couldn't control.
So good.
How do you rebuild a marriage that's falling apart? You pray for what you can't control, but you show up daily for what you can control.
Amen.
Right? How do you bounce back from a divorce, a devastating divorce, and where you feel as if your entire identity was ripped from you and you lost everything? You give God what you can control, but you show up daily for what you can work on. While God's working on what He works on, you're working on what you can work on. Right?
And what I love about that, I think it's like her testimony is what opened the door, because Boaz, shares, he said, you clung to your mother-in-law. You came to a people you didn't know. I heard about what you did. I heard about your loyalty. I heard about your hard work. Right. And so I feel like, how do we overcome? By the blood of the Lamb and the word of our testimony. It's like her testimony opened the door, and here she was, where it's like most of us don't want to share our testimony. We don't want to, walk out our loyalty or be faithful to the call, because what are people going to think about me? Mm-hmm. Or what are they going to say? Or, you know what I mean? Maybe it's not shaped the way it should, or I don't want to look a certain way, instead of just being like, no, I'm going to be bold with my testimony, and God will open that door for me by me being faithful to Him. So
yeah.
It's crazy how we're ashamed of the very thing that's going to bring somebody else freedom.
Come on, so good.
It's crazy to think about that.
You're absolutely right. I think with the time doesn't heal. I think too often if you have a cut, right? Let's say you have a cut in a real wound, and you're like, I'm just going to let that sit. Time will just heal it. There's always a permanent mark of what you didn't do during the time you should have done something to heal it right.
Wow. That's good.
Wow, come on.
So if I have a giant cut on my arm, it's wide open, and I go, you know what? Full trust, that's just going to heal every day. No wound, no stitches, no bandage, no Neosporin. Let it go. Let it go. No cleaning it out. Let it go. All of a sudden, 5 years later, you look down and go, why in the heck do I still have this mark? Why do I still have this indicator of pain? Why do I still have this massive scar on my arm? Because during the time in which healing should have been occurring, you didn't do the steps that helped the healing to have a finalization.
Right. You didn't show up.
We didn't show up for any of the healing action, right? We thought, let's ignore the pain, focus over here, and somehow that pain will be magically erased because I believe in a magical God.
Yeah.
God says spend time on what the pain is and spend time over here, but don't overstep what you can't control.
Right.
You can't ignore it. There's a difference between can't control and ignoring.
Right.
Too often we say can't control it and we ignore it.
Right.
And we leave people in pain.
Right.
Or we leave ourselves in pain because we think it's a not control thing. And we confuse a lot of ignoring versus not controlling.
Right.
You have to do healing things while you're trying to heal, but it doesn't mean that's all you do or you don't do it.
Yeah.
And that's a hard balance to really like figure out what those steps are.
Yeah. So in closing, like, how do you get to that next level in your career? Give God what you can't control. Show up every day. Show up every day. Put in the work and commit to God what you can't control. How do you get past grief? Show up every day. Give God what you can't control. How do you get closer to God? How do you get closer to God? Show up every day. Put in the work. You often hear people say, I'm not hearing from God. I'm not hearing from God. Well, are you showing up every day? Because if you show up, I guarantee he'll show up. Right? You can do what you can and ask God to take care of what you can't do. Let him take care of what you can't do. My pastor used to say, make a statement that I had a difference of opinion on. But the more I look in Scripture, I understand with greater depth. He said, God's grace works in a way where you do what you do, and when you reach your limit, that's when he steps in and does what he does. And there's a lot of nuances to that, but in life, the application of grace in our life, not salvation grace, but the application of grace, being in the grace zone in our life, it's a requirement of us showing up, being consistent, putting in our work, giving God what we can't work on. Because only he needs to work in the supernatural things, but you need to work on the natural things. So, and the gospel is amazing because it shows up in Scripture all the time. The gospel is that I cannot control what happened to me. I cannot control the family I was born in. I cannot control where in time I was born. I cannot control all those things. But God did something that I couldn't do, in that he looked at my condition and he saw that I was not able to ever do anything to cover my own sins. And he stepped in and took care of that. Amen. By dying on a cross and being resurrected on the third day. And so if you're watching this right now, if you're listening to this, I want to encourage you and I want to invite you. Maybe you've been doing all that you can. Salvation and a relationship with God is something that only he does in your life. Release yourself to him. And then you show up on a daily basis. And let's see what God does in your life. So thanks so much for being with us today. I hope you've enjoyed this broadcast, this episode, this experience. That's what it is. As always, we just want to encourage you to continue to connect with us. If you need prayer, feel free to call the number below, email, text message us. If you'd like to support the ministry, feel free to do that too. We're just grateful that you took time to be with us today and hope that you are blessed. Let us know how this is touching your life, how this is transforming you, and how this is helping you move towards a worthy ideal in your life. We'd love to hear from you. Thanks for joining us. Let me pray for you. God, thank you for every single person that joined in and tuned in and listened in today, Lord. I just ask that your spirit may have spoken words that were beyond the natural words that I used, but words that were coming directly from your heart, that they may know that they're loved, that they're cared for, that you are definitely interested in every detail of their life, that even right now, when they're thinking about all the things that have gone wrong in their life, now you are at work. May they just zoom out and see the bigger picture of your hand in their affairs. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.
Amen.
Hey everyone, thank you so much for joining us at Relevant Church, our online worship experience. We're so glad that you joined us today on Father's Day. So a huge shout out to all the men out there, all the fathers, all the daddies. Happy Father's Day. Hope this is an amazing day. Pastor Jonathan, I love you. Our church loves you. Hope that you have a great Father's Day as well, and all of our pastors, as well as all the men watching, all the dads out there. I hope that your kids are obeying especially today, and that you're just having a great day to be able to relax, enjoy family time. But we love you guys. Happy Father's Day. If you need anything, please reach out to us here at Relevant Church. Connect with us, share with us how we can support you. You can follow us on social media through Instagram or Facebook, and you can subscribe to our YouTube channel. We are here to support you. Please stay connected during this time. We love you and can't wait to see you next week. Have a blessed day, everyone. Take care and happy Father's Day.